Thanks for having me back. I told someone before it's a slightly intimidating crowd, and not because it's unfriendly, but simply because I've already spoken for you 2 or 3 times already, and I feel like you already know most of the things. I got to step up my game a little bit to tell you something that you may not have heard. So with that in mind, I put together something new. So this is Toca Timeline, a sort of a take on 8 different things, or sort of phases that we've gone through with the company, and sort of where that has taken us. Some good and some less good. And just some sort of snapshots and examples, and a lot of going through old material just to sort of find and re-remember some things that I'd forgotten myself during these 4 years. It's done in chapter form, that's how I thought about it, because there's this thought that we've had even from the beginning, and this phrase that's going to go in the book. And there is no book. There's no one writing a book, to my knowledge, and I'm not writing a book myself either, but we always talked about the company from the beginning as something worthy of having a book written about it. Which sounds maybe very big and pompous, but I think there's something in that. Like, make things that are on the level that someone would want to document that in some shape or form later. Now, whether they do or they don't, I don't know, and it's almost irrelevant. But it's a way of thinking about things and a way of referencing things as well, especially when things go bad. We say, oh, well, that's going to be a good chapter in the book. That's how we say things constantly, or sort of strange meetings are like, well, that's going in the book for sure. So the question is now, who's going to remember all this stuff for this book that someone may or may not write at some point in time? So with that in mind, Chapter 1, Cautious and Confident. This is autumn 2010. This is me and my co-founder. This is Emil Ovmar, the guy I started the company with. This is from our first Instagram feed, sort of introducing the company. This is the 2 of us. Emil is a user experience designer, complete genius, and just the creative mind behind all of our apps. But some may or you may not know that Toca was not the first company that we started together. We actually started a company called Brickmark. So if you had emails from me in the beginning, you probably saw Björn at brickmark.com, because Brickmark was the company of companies that we started. Because not only were we sort of naive enough to think that we could start one company, we thought we could probably start a whole series of companies at the same time. This is sort of a very corporate slide that I did for Bonnier, my owners. Some of it's in Swedish, you can't quite see what it is, but it's basically sort of showing a core team and working with multiple different companies from the beginning. We had about 4 or 5 things going at the same time before we realized that maybe we should just focus and do one thing, but it was extremely ambitious from the beginning, and not maybe super realistic. But yeah, a little bit naive. Also very, very confident. This I think I've shown before. This is the release schedule that we planned from the beginning. This is the figures that are tiny at the top there is the amount of developers. So it starts with 2, and then it goes to 3, and at the end it goes to 4. And the amount of rows are the projects that we're going to release during the first year. 29 apps with eventually getting to 4 developers. And the gray in the middle, that's the Swedish vacation, because you do not mess with that. You gotta have 4 weeks solid vacation. So in that, no one's doing anything. But the rest of the weeks, it's gonna be all go. We actually somehow managed to put out 10 apps the first year, which is amazing, because this year I'm probably gonna be releasing 5. So and with a team which is 3 or 4 times as large. But yeah, super ambitious and very confident. I just found some old stuff as well, just sort of going through. This is the autumn. We have no idea what we're doing. And we're just sort of playing around and we're looking for things. And this is, I think you've seen this before, one of the models that I showed with different ways of playing. This isn't a model, but this is examples that Emil put together of just inspirational sheets of sort of manipulative play, make-believe play, creative play, active play. It should have been learning play as well, but I got rid of that one. But just sort of different types, us going through toy catalogs, Emil ordering toy catalogs, old ones from the 50s and 60s off eBay, and just sort of putting them up and buying old toys just to sort of figure out what's going on out there. Again, we haven't hired any developers yet, that's why the schedule looked the way it did. We're just thinking, we can probably build multiple companies and we can definitely do 30 apps in a year, no problem. And we'll just go into one of these categories. It's going to be like, we got it. So a lot of this sort of figuring out the inspiration behind how do we do this. And then looking a lot at technology. Arguably looked more at technology then than we do now. I can get to that, why that's interesting later, but this is sort of thoughts on what we can do with these devices, and this is just some of the videos that we looked at, the sort of like, this is an interesting thing. Having fun with the accelerometer. This other one is really innovative, and sort of I haven't seen anything like this for quite some time. It's Pirata Boat Race, which is just using the device in another way. Like, you know, so we're looking at all these things that have nothing to do with kids' games. We looked at toys, but then we're just like, what are people doing with this device? What kind of fun stuff is happening out there? What are people playing with? But not necessarily in the kids' space. This is 2 examples. Loads more. As I mentioned before, just fine-tuning the brand. Like, we already knew what we were going to be called. We had a terrible name first, some of you know that. Called Rainbow Teeth was our first name. Super bad. Luckily, Ubisoft owns Rainbow in the games category because of Rainbow Six, so that was a no-show, and that was a blessing in disguise. This is just before we tweaked the eyes and before we got the typography right. It's just sort of so many iterations of this, just trying to get the logo right, trying to get the feeling right, all of these things. Like so much time, several months spent just figuring these things out. And not to brag about downloads, but I will, to keep some sort of progression running through the book. We haven't released the product yet, so this is ending in December 2010. We have 0 downloads, 0 products, 0 engineers, and just an idea, and we're going to start 4th of January 2011. We're going to sort of meet, and we're going to start working. So, Chapter 2, Hello Helicopter Taxi. This is the first team. And this is the team called Spelbolaget. Spelbolaget is a Swedish word for the games company, because as I mentioned, we were starting multiple companies. So this was the games company, and still to this day, our Dropbox folder is called Spelbolaget. Even for the Americans that have no idea what that means, we just left it. It's still called the games company. So the 6 of us, JP, a lot of you have met and spoke last year. But this is sort of just the core team. It's me, Emil, Chris, JP, Emil, and Andre. And this is sort of the first little mini team that we got going. The final testing and the first submit, that post-it is the final submit post-it. You know, when you commit to something, we're still running things on post-it notes. That is it. It says submit heli, which is submit helicopter taxi to the App Store, and that's a bottle of very cheap Hungarian champagne that we finally got the drink after we submitted this app. This is, and that to the left, there is Emil and Chris on the floor of our office playtesting and sort of just figuring out the final pieces of Toca Tea Party. And since it was a long time ago, it's over 4 years ago, and I'll show you what we did with the devices, sort of these things. You'll see a little bit of the inspiration for the videos I showed before, what we were trying to do. So this is helicopter taxi first.
Toca boca! Hey, buddy!
That was Helicopter Taxi, the shorter version. And then the second app, this is iPhone only at the time, and sort of very much using the camera, sort of getting an augmented reality feeling, but not actually augmented reality. And then the second product that we released was Toca Tea Party. And so Chris, as you'll recognize, she's the play designer, she's in it. That is Emil's daughter. She's also on the icon of Toca Hair Salon Me and in numerous apps, marketing materials. She's a bit of an Easter egg for Toca Boca, actually. She's in a lot of stuff. And this is also Emil's living room that we're filming this in.
Huh? Toca boca.
That was the first two products that we released. They came out March 15th, 2011. By April 2011, remarkably, we had 72,000 downloads. I would never have said this until I checked this figure myself, but then I realized there's a reason for that, and that was that we did some sort of giveaway and managed to get 55,000 downloads in one day. So the rest, I'll show you later, you'll see what it looks like. So I had to double check that figure, like that cannot be true. That's certainly not what it felt like at the time. Right, so Chapter 3, Hairy Harry. This is in June 2011. So we had this idea process with a lot of sort of formalized at the time. It had sort of an evolutionary phases. So things were sort of, it was in the ocean, and it went to the river, and then it went to the mud, and sort of it was very sort of formalized. And I had all these tiny little notes behind me with all the ideas. And it was just a phrase, and I kept some of them. Some of them are still hanging next to my desk. One of them is just a picture of a bunch of dogs lying in a big pile, and then just the phrase dogastrophe. That's it. It's just a pun, basically. Instead of a catastrophe, it's a dogastrophe. Nothing else there. That one and Toca dancing radio, which is exactly that. Needless to say, none of these ever got made. But one which was there was this sort of character with a lot of hair that we called Hairy Harry, or from the beginning called Hairy Hippie Hair Salon. And the original idea was that there's a hairy hippie that comes into the salon who has so much beard, he's so overgrown that you have to sort of shave him into recognizability somehow. And that, for some reason, we yes, we should do that. That sounds like a good idea. And that managed to pass through all these phases. I can't remember what I was thinking at the time. But this, of course, gradually, we lost the hippie and we lost the hairy Harry and everything, and then sort of ended up being sort of more of a hair salon. And this is an early sketch of what that looked like. Some of you who played it will notice that it's similar. It's not quite there yet, but it sort of has all the object at the top, and the character's not ready. But just an early sketch, you got the idea of where things started. And this deserves a chapter because it was sort of this is where it started to change. Like, partly it was our best-selling product, but also we made it free, because this is the #1 YouTube comment that we get. Made it free. With as many E's as you could possibly imagine. So that's just what it looks like. And that little blip over there, that's why we had 72,000 for the beginning. But that's what happened when we made it free. So compared to my normal downloads, as you can see, weren't very impressive. This changed the whole company. And so this app, which was the best selling at the time, although you can hardly see it, you can see sort of it was doing a little bit better than in the beginning at least. But making that free and doing some marketing around that really made it take off in a very, very big manner. And then suddenly, I was getting 250,000 downloads a day. And then when I switched it back to paid again, then of course, I have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that now have it on their phone talking about it, saying you should try this out. That was the beginning of this cycle, and that was like the #1 thing that made all the difference for us. Otherwise, I don't know if we would have ever gotten off the ground properly. So at the end of September 2011, about 2.4 million downloads in total. Chapter 5, Alluring America. We're based in Stockholm, in Sweden. That's where the company started. My email is Swedish, and I'm half Swedish, half English. We always knew that Sweden was too small of a market, but we thought that we could probably do it remotely. And then after about a year, we realized, like, okay, US is it. Like, if we do not make it in the US, we're not going to make it. And there were many different reasons for that. So I decided after about a year that I have to go. I don't know who I'm going to send. I'll have to send myself. So I'll just move to the US and figure it out from there. This is our first office. It's of course, some sort of little cubicle booth, because that's what Americans have, apparently. So that's what I moved into. Moved from this lovely, light, IKEA-furnished, white, lofty kind of space to a cubicle, which is sort of ironic somehow. So it's just me. That was it. I didn't have any employees or anything. But I just set up in San Francisco and Jackson Street with one of our sort of Bonnier colleague companies. I just took a back room there and I just took a seat. And it was much, much harder, and it has been much harder than I originally thought that it was going to be. I felt like I had to unlearn a lot of the things I thought I knew about America. I'm not saying San Francisco is an accurate depiction of America in any way, but it's substantially different from what I imagined that it was going to be. And I think it would almost have been easier for me if I'd moved to a completely different country. If I moved to Indonesia, I think I would have moved there thinking, I know nothing about Indonesia, I'm going to have to take this all in, as opposed to moving to the America and thinking, I've watched American movies for 20 years, I've listened to American music for 20 years, this is going to be easy. And then I go there and realize this is not easy. This is very hard, and I still feel that the same way today. So there's a few reasons for moving apart from that as well. One is this is the sticker that you get when you go to Apple. Just one of the first times I was there at Cupertino. It's really hard to start a relationship from a long distance. I think you can maintain a relationship, very probably, but I don't think you can start one. Not a very good one anyway. I think that's probably true for business relationships and probably true for a lot of other relationships as well. But if you start off in a good place, you can see where it goes after that. And we had a good relationship with Apple in London, but it's Cupertino that runs the show. So that was a big, big reason. We just have to get there. And the same thing goes for Google, the same thing goes for Amazon, and the same thing goes for Microsoft that aren't immediately close by, but they're all on the same coast. Second reason, just finding a new team. Getting a type of person that I couldn't find in Sweden. This is the embryos of our growth team, which currently is now sort of in another shape and form, but just finding people that had more experience in this space that I had a hard time doing myself, and also just figuring out the American market in a big way. In all of this sort of relationship building and trying to sort of understand what can we do to be a better partner to these platforms that are so important to us, one of the things we picked up on was just this Hairy Harry had got a lot of comments, and the number one comment, apart from make it free, is please have some hair curling in it. And the way in which we'd done the app, it was very hard to do hair curling for some reason. We tried it a few times and gave up, and in the end we decided, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to completely redo the app from the beginning. So Toca Hair Salon 2 is 100% recoded from scratch. Even if it looks pretty similar, it's actually completely new, just to figure out the hair curling. It's remarkable. But once that actually came back, this is what we got. We got the editor's choice over Christmas, like the best possible week you could ever get it. And this was just a good example of a lot of stuff, just partly listening to your audience, but also fostering a good relationship and taking a lot of time and a lot of, like America, but still personal sacrifice to move 9 time zones over just to try to make this work. This led to some great stuff as well. So we were in a TV commercial, for instance, which I'll blink and you'll miss it, but still. Wild! There you go. There it was. You don't need to see the rest. And also led to us being in the WWDC 2012 keynote video.
Mackenzie's speech is somewhat difficult to understand. Her palate doesn't work the way that it should. In the world of speech-language pathology, the iPad is a tool that's definitely been embraced. We use the Toca apps to facilitate her describing skills. Is a yellow circle. Good job. I think the coolest thing about those apps are that they're so engaging and so fun. Kids don't realize that they're actually working on particular skills. They become a real toy for her, a tool for me, but a toy for her.
It's really fantastic to see what we have created has made a difference in people's lives. Those reactions and words we hear are more important than any downloads. We looked at the data that was out there, and the obvious choice was to develop for iOS. And iOS is so intuitive for everyone using it, regardless of age. Apps have the biggest impact on humanity right now. It feels fantastic that people can find so much happiness and use for apps.
So note Emil's 2 kids in that video, and also Emil calling me afterwards and said, I think I said something really strange. I think I said that apps are the biggest impact on humanity right now. And that is, of course, what ended up being in the final video. They also filmed me for like 2 hours, and I did not get 1 second in that clip. There was a film crew outside my office, which was so big that I walked past it, assuming that this has got to be something else, until I had to come back out and like, oh, this is for me. Okay, this is a little more serious than I first thought, and still not 1 single second. Anyway.
I think it's worth noting that 2 guys with hardly any hair made Toca hair salon. I think that sometimes you need to pause for a second and let that soak in.
I've thought a lot about hair and the lack of it, at least. So at the end of December, we had 25.8 million downloads, somewhere there. So, Chapter 5, starting Sego. So it started by going to Vegas, which was terrible apart from this part, when we won a Carpi for most pioneering team in children's technology. You can see how happy I was about it. Vegas was the first time for me and was utterly dreadful, awful place. I absolutely never want to go if I really do not have to, but this was a bit of a highlight. So that's how the year started anyway, and it's the chapters here because it's just highlighting a point in time where we'd for a long time been thinking about where could we go, what else could we be doing in this space, how can we take what we have and sort of make it even bigger. This I don't think I've ever shown. This is an old matrix. It's keeping the old fonts and everything, and I'm not sure how well you can read it necessarily, but it just on the left side just takes up different verbs of like what are kids doing, regardless of where they're doing it, regardless of platform or anything, and then just segmenting it into age and just sort of saying, where could we be? And there's a lot of familiar names up here. There's like Montessorium and Duck Duck Moose and PBS and a lot of things. But up the very top corner of the matrix, top left of things, and you can see where we think that we either were or should be. The top left of the matrix was something called the Tickle Tap apps. And these are some examples of that. And this was just a set of sort of coherently branded products that we thought had a lot of potential, that was sort of small and interesting and sort of taking on a tiny sort of like tiny little interaction pattern or something that had something just interesting and consistent across it. And then I met Jason sort of randomly at a conference in LA, Kids App conference actually, and we just had lunch and complained over like, this is a terrible conference. This is one of the worst conferences I've ever been to. And he's like, yes, I agree, this is terrible. Let's have lunch and talk about how bad it is. So we did. It was the first time we met. And we just got along. We got along really well. And we started just talking about, well, how could this be better? And we figured out that we shared a lot of design philosophy in sort of how we thought about things. So after a lot of back and forth, we ended up going to Canada. This is a picture of my Bonnier chairman playing air guitar in a lawyer's office in Toronto because it was a very long day and we were getting very bored. So at the end, there's nothing to do really. We're just waiting for lawyers doing things back and forth. So we just started playing music and air guitar. So that's what we were doing for a few hours while Jason Crow was being in another room. I don't know what he was doing. But anyway, we took sort of the mother company of the Tickle Tap apps, which is called Synchro, and sort of merged it in a way with Toca and created something new. It's called Sego Mini. So it's sort of we co-developed the brand idea and we took a lot of the apps that already were there that they had reworked, and then we sort of kept polishing them up a little bit and we branded them consistently, came up with a Sego Mini name, changed the names for everything, and sort of scratched a few apps that we didn't think were up to par, and then we sort of relaunched them out into the open again. And this is just some nice, this is little mini illustrations of Hillary, the community manager at Sega, which does some lovely stuff, but sort of this sibling feeling that the San Francisco office where I work, we work with both, but there's just something very, very shared in terms of how we think about things, and we share a lot of resources, but the studio works completely independently, focuses on a younger age group and sort of focusing on building its own brand, Sega Mini first, and then maybe they'd graduate up when they get a little older to think about Toca Boca. So this brings us to June 2013. By then we have about 43.2 million downloads. So chapter 6, platforms and partners. This is how many apps we had out at the time. These were the ones that were in Unity. Started listing what the other ones were in as well, but it became very messy. It was a mixture of sort of some are native in Objective-C, and some are Cocos 2D, and some are combinations, and some are all kinds of frameworks and things that we were using. And we just realized that this is not really going to work. We think we have to sort of get better to be able to sort of reuse certain things a little bit, but more importantly, we need to be on more platforms sooner or later, because business development is really tricky on iOS alone. It really limits your options, so we needed to do that. And also, Android was growing a lot at the time. Now, I'd looked at Android very early and sort of said that no one ever buys anything on Android, so I'm not going to do it, but that was sort of taking off. As mentioned before, it's still smaller, but at least it was moving. So we started sort of at the end here, we started going to Unity and started trying to get the teams over. And I don't know how many have made that shift, but it's pretty tricky. It's a completely different way of working for everyone, not just the developers. It's like a big, big shift. And while we did some things, sort of the public Instagram feed was like, check out our 3D printed models of Toca cars and Toca Mini, isn't it cool? This is what it really felt like most of the time. It was just so hard. It kept going wrong. And like Toca Mini was called Toca Friends from the beginning, and was some sort of collectible idea where you're going to trade things with each other, and like nothing worked. Toca Mini was very close to never be released until we managed to sort of figure out how we were going to save it and turn it into something useful. But yeah, this is the feeling. Most of those months are just like, I don't even know if anything is ever going to come out from this studio ever again, because it was so late and not as good as it should have been, and lost. It was just very frustrating for everyone involved. But once we were through it, at least, we sort of actually added some new partners, at least. You know, we were preloaded on Samsung tablets, which I had to go to Korea for quite a few times and eat some weird stuff, dinners and all kinds of things. But got some good partners with this, and also sort of that idea of just having new SKUs that we could start to sort of use and from business development opened up the ideas to other things as well. Like, well, maybe we could have other partners. So much later, we did some collaborations. So one of them was Toca Inc., which is a collaboration with Virginia Elwood. This is a Brooklyn tattoo artist, which is what Catalina got. Just some her take on sort of Americana tattoos with some of our characters. And we also did one of the strangest things, and which is definitely a chapter in the book in its own right, is created this toy called Paper Creatures with an Argentinian street artist. And we went to Buenos Aires and managed to get a full-on city support for an event in a big park in the middle of Buenos Aires, together with the city of Buenos Aires, who at the same time was celebrating something like the 25th Children's Convention Day or something like that. It was super strange. So suddenly we're in Argentina having an event with the city of Buenos Aires government. Super strange. but yeah, definitely something for the book. This takes us to about January of 2014. By then, around 65 million downloads. So, chapter 7, Pure Play. This is relatively recently, in September. So we'd always been very sort of strong on what the brand was, and we'd had a very sort of strong internal voice of what we thought that we were about, and what we did and what we did not do. But we realized over the time that it was pretty tricky sometimes for other people to perceive what that actually was. And I think maybe if you're in the industry and you have a very sort of professional look on it. I think a lot of the sort of the attention to detail, that we're always gender neutral, and all of those sorts of things that they came through. But it was pretty tricky for a lot of for just parents that are not in this industry to really sort of perceive what are we trying to do. So we figured we got to take a clearer stand publicly what it was, and we decided sort of after a lot of soul searching and just we need to take a clearer stand for play. I think this is one of the things that came from me moving to the US as well, is just hearing and sort of learning how deeply interlinked children are with education. And those two words are almost synonymous. And it's not necessarily something bad, but it's not necessarily something good either, because in that, a lot of other things can be lost. And play was one of those things, because the opportunity for kids to play has actually declined a lot. Over 20% of American schools have eliminated recess just to make more time for schoolwork. And there's a lot of figures like that, just sort of play is actually declining. And while I think it's being done with the best of intentions, trying to make kids succeed better, I think there could be unintended outcomes for that, which might not be what they were looking for. And we felt we need to have an opinion and a voice in this, also because every time I say I work with apps, the first thing everyone says, only in America this happens, oh, educational apps. And you can sort of go into semantics and say, well, it's sort of more learning, more than education, or you can just sort of say yes to make it easy and not be bothered to have the discussion, or you can actually take a stand and say, no, it's not educational, and that's fine. It's designed for play, and that's the only thing we want, and that has a right in itself. So we decided we needed to say this. We need to talk about this to a high degree. So we started this section called Toca magazine, which is sort of a parent-directed site where we hired an editor, Ingrid Simone from Common Sense Media, to just start writing about these issues and just have a clearer voice, not just internally think we know what we're about and everyone else should figure it out, but actually tell them full on and have a sort of a clearer opinion in this as well. Also sort of thinking about, well, what can play do and what can we do with that? How can we sort of manifest this? So this is the booth that we set up in South by Southwest. This is sort of the Games Expo. It's open to everyone. This is the first day before it's opened. So everything was completely white, which if you've ever been to a Game Expo is a pretty rare color scheme in the big black halls of gaming at large. So what we did is we just let kids decorate the booth. And so as kids came in, we handed them sticker sheets and we let them do whatever they wanted. And this is what they did. So over the course of 3 days, they put up over 100,000 stickers. And it was both just a fun experience in itself, and it just looks like a little piece of art in itself, and it's just really stuck out, and it's just play. That's all it is. There's nothing else to it. It's just fun. It's just from both parents and kids are having fun with this. You're just getting big sticker sheets, and suddenly you can do things that you could not do anywhere else. And that was really appealing. It's just sort of like, this is just very, very different than the rest of everything. I think it just manifests what we were trying to do very well. In parallel to this, also there's thinking, well, if it's all about play, how are we actually designing our apps? How are we doing this? How do we make sure that the apps that we're putting out genuinely is aligned with what we want? Because looking at the broad portfolio, there's some hits, there are also a lot of misses, where partly things that we didn't execute as well as we could have, and maybe some concepts that we never should have picked up from the beginning. This is generally just the process of what it looks like on a very simple level. But that's maybe less important than just us going back and looking through all of the apps and just evaluating everything from the beginning, of saying, okay, these are all the apps we've made. Let's look at many different angles and just say, how are they scoring? And what are the things that are scoring really, really well from our opinion? When we sort of, in retrospect, look back and just critically glance at everything we've done. And there's a few themes that came through which were very, very clear. Partly is that we're good at 3 types of play. First one is role-playing, the second one is creative and manipulative play, and the third one is sort of exploratory and experimental. These aren't the formal terms, but that's how we chose to define them. And these are the 3 areas that we do well. And this started to become a document internally that we call the essence of Toca Boca. Like, what is it which really, how does this align with the company at large, and how do we make sure that all the apps that we make genuinely adhere to the same values and ideas that we want the company to be perceived as. So in this sort of system, there's 3 different questions, basically, or statements that we look through, and I won't go through it in rigorous detail because there's a lot there, but the first one is, I'm really curious as to what this is about. And this is the feeling you get when you open the app, like, I'm curious about this, and these are some of the characteristics, sort of the instant gratification, the 15 seconds that was referenced before, sort of how do I immediately okay, I get it. Like, and some things that we like, it's familiar and weird. That's just, we like that. That's not necessarily a recipe for success, but we like it. That fits us well. The second statement after that is, I want to explore more and more. How can I just, okay, I get it. What can I now do? How can I go deeper into this? How can I get a stronger sort of feeling and sort of the more just concept being big enough, basically? And how can I dive into that? And then the final sort of stage is like, wow, I can do what I want, but I could do even more than I thought I could from the beginning. That's the third level of things, of just, level of detail and sort of feeling this agency and control, like something like, I get it, I have this, I can control this, it does what I want it to do. And if we get these 3, that makes the essence of Toca Boca somehow. And this is now a document that our play designers work with, and our producer Emil very closely together to make sure that all new concepts try to follow this to as high a degree as possible to sort of align with everything. This is developed during last year, and at the end of last year we then reached 87.6 million downloads. Final chapter, not for the book but for the talk. Hopefully there's going to be more chapters. Ventures and video. So we've been thinking a long time of sort of how can we take this brand into other areas. I think there was a reference of time, which I think makes a lot of sense. It's just, there are categories that you can use this device for that we're not present in whatsoever, and something that I think we could do well. And we did this, started to think about it sort of in the same ways we took on the apps from the beginning, and thinking, okay, if we start from a kid's perspective, looking at these devices, what is the best possible experience that we could do within this realm? And we had access to a lot of old IP and things like that through our sort of parent company, which is a 200-year-old book publisher, but we choose not to use any of that because we didn't think that that necessarily was going to translate to these kind of experiences that we wanted. Not to say that it cannot be done, it's just we felt that it wasn't aligned with what we wanted to do. And we're trying to think about video as we're sort of setting this up now in the same way, and sort of just keeping the kids' perspective of video. So this is an example of how kids' TV can look today. And this is Reading Power Bingo with Super Y. And I'm not calling them out because they're worse than anything else. It's just a good example of especially this sort of more American mindset that everything that kids do at every given second has to be explicitly educational, or it is a complete waste of time. And something I strongly disagree with. Again, it's not to say that it has no place, but there's place for other things too. So if it were the case that kids really loved the shows that were on regular TV, you know, when there used to be this distribution monopoly where only regular TV shows could have, you know, regular TV channels could have TV shows. If it were the case that the kids' programming on that was so good that the kids loved that more than anything else, that it's the best possible shows that a kid could possibly imagine, I would think that they would be watching that on YouTube as well. Now, because on YouTube you can search for anything, but they're not. Not as much as they're watching other things. Like this, like a kid playing with a train, which has been watched 14 million times. And you could ask any TV exec, is this quality? Is this TV? Is this what kids want? And they'd say, absolutely not. This is not quality. We want something wholesome, we want something which is structured, 21 minutes, 30 episodes per season, and so on and so forth. But again, if kids really preferred that to everything else, why are they watching this? Why are they watching Stampy Longhead? Why are they watching unboxing videos? There's something here. There's something here from a kid's perspective. Once they can choose freely, they're actually choosing something completely different. And if we want to build a video product which is really relevant for 2015, maybe we should start from the kids' perspective and see what kind of video are kids genuinely liking, and also how are they experiencing this. trying to explain anything which is not on demand to a kid today is crazy. I think about this. I have a almost 10-month-old daughter. How am I going to explain any of this? I mean, you mean to say that someone decided in what order you had to watch TV, and that if you were late to the show, you just missed a part of it? Like, it's an absurd idea, and it is completely absurd. Just as absurd as sort of passwords and all other kinds of strange things that I'm going to have to explain. And it's very, very strange. I think the whole experience of it is very much gone from, okay, so we have TV, so let's take TV and put that on an iPad with a play button. That's as far as we've gotten, but that's not very far. Like, now, having it on demand is better than not having it on demand, and I think everyone would agree that is indeed an improvement. But there's got to be more there somehow. My general sort of thesis and my idea is that video is not TV. I think the two are diverging very, very strongly. It's a fork in a road, and currently we're seeing a lot of TV, which is on demand. I'm not really very interested in TV, but I'm very interested in video. And I think the two are really separating in a very strong and big way. And I think this new little division that we're now setting up, we just announced it very recently. I hired a guy called Jay Milligan from Sesame Street who's going to be heading up this for us in New York. And it's going to be its own little mini studio focusing on both producing and sort of distributing new kinds of video and trying to find sort of a user experience that works. But it's leaving all this luggage and all this baggage that we have and all this legacy behind. That's saying, my owners still own, just as they own books, but before, when we were going to do the apps, they own the largest TV channel in Sweden. They own the largest TV channel in Finland. I'm not going to use any of that. I'm sure it fills its purpose, but not for what I want to do. So we're going to try to design this completely as if there is no legacy whatsoever, and that, I think, is going to be our edge. It's basically TV you can touch, and I don't know exactly what that is. I don't think it's pure interactive video simply because it's too early, but I am intrigued by that idea, and I am intrigued with the ideas of sort of, even in an asynchronous manner, you can get interactivity, and sort of how can you get participation even if it isn't direct. There's a lot of interesting ideas, and this is sort of the question that we're asking to this team, is just, what if you had TV you could touch? What would that look like, and how would that work? And that's what this team is going to be developing. It's going to be on mobile. It's going to be a new kind of content. We're going to be making some content ourselves, and also going to be sourcing some new kind of video material. And it's going to be a different kind of user experience than what you're usually used to from this sort of play button interface. This took us to April, just now, about 94 million downloads in April. But I don't want to end on a download video. I want to end on something which sort of both is a sort of an experiment in video that we did, and also just sort of showcasing an interesting experiment of where we can take the brands that stand for something cool. So this is a collaboration that we did with a band called The Colleagues, that we've made a sort of a video that's completely designed in Toca nature, sort of taking kids' culture and blending it with a little bit of pop culture. Let's have a look at this.
don't start, what you waiting for?
Thanks a lot.